Desperate times, and so we are rising to the occasion. My co-host is Mr. Dr. Jeffrey Walcott himself. How are you doing, Dr. Walcott?
I'm good. It's glad to be back.
Yeah, I'm telling you, listen, we always like to have you in the studio. You know that?
Of course.
Right, and especially on this topic. We know we call you at short notice to say, listen, you had to come in to share this with us, share your knowledge on this particular topic, which we're going to be talking about in a little while. And thank you very much for making it at such short notice.
No problem.
Dr. Walcott, of course, is consulting psychiatrist for Kingston and St. Andrew Community Mental Health Services. And we have a very, very special guest in the studio. Normally you hear him in other parts of IRIA FM, on other programs, but here he is on Sex Wise, rightly so this evening. Attorney at Law, Linton Gordon. How are you doing, Mr. Linton Gordon?
Fine, thank you very much. Glad to have me.
All right. And another thing is so that Mr. Linton Gordon came in at very short notice too, and this is to show you how serious the issue is that we're going to be discussing this evening. We're really looking this evening at rape. We're continuing that discussion. The psychology of rape we're looking at, and we're looking at the legal issues regarding rape, especially as it concerns us right here in Jamaica. We're doing this against the background, this particular program against the background of the vicious rape we heard of in St. James, where a baby and two children and two adults were viciously raped. And then we also heard of the buggering of two young boys. And this is for us this is an escalation in a way in terms of how bad this is getting. Rape, though, is an ongoing thing in Jamaica, and it's something that we have talked about time and time and time again here in this space. Let me start with Mr. Gordon. Mr. Linton Gordon, in terms of the legal issues, Linton, because we want to get this right. We've been having, here again, so many discussions of what rape is, about what rape is. So what is a legal definition within the Jamaican context of rape?
A rape is any penetration of another person's, usually a woman's, sex organ or anus against her permission. And there's a new law now that has extended the penetration not only to a sex organ, in this case the man's penis, but other parts of his body. And I will highlight more on those definitions as we go along.
All right, so penetration.
But the elements are that there must be a lack of consent and there must be penetration.
All right.
Now, penetration needs not be long, needs not be in the nature of what is commonly called sexual intercourse. A mere penetration, and it needs not be deep. Penetration means entry, no matter how nominal.
And does it have to be penetration of the vagina?
Yes. And but not only the vagina anymore. Anal penetration is also included.
Of the woman or also
Both.
of the man?
Both.
So now a man can be raped now?
Yes.
Because 2 years ago we were saying that a man couldn't be raped.
Well, 2 years ago it was referred to rape loosely. Mm-hmm. But it was a form of, it's rape without a legal definition of rape 2 years ago. It falls under what is called the Buggery Act. Mm-hmm. Then, which means that it was called unnatural and unusual conduct, mm-hmm. but it was also a violation of a person.
So what is the current, we have a definition, what's the current situation? Because it seems like it's pretty dynamic. As I said before, 2 years ago we were saying that a man couldn't be raped. We see a movement here.
Well, let me tell you what has happened recently. A law has been committed, a law has been passed, mm-hmm. which has made the whole question of sexual offenses very, very serious, and there are areas of the law that I have no doubt will in due course be challenged in the Constitutional Court, because the penalty, for example, for rape carries a minimum sentence. So the judge's discretion is taken away, and the judge is required by Section 6 of the new Act to sentence someone convicted of rape to either life imprisonment or to a term of imprisonment of not less than 15 years, which means that no matter what the circumstances are, no matter how mitigating the circumstances may be, the judge has no discretion anymore in determining the sentence, no discretion below
15.
a threshold of 15 years.
How new is this?
This is a 2009 law.
Okay, so it's just the other day.
Very new.
Right.
By our standard.
And the maximum is life.
Yes.
Right. Do you know of anyone who has ever been sentenced to life in prison in Jamaica for rape? Any case?
No, not offhand. But there are instances where long terms have been imposed on persons prior to this act. The judges, I must say, have been absolutely professional in the use of their discretion in sentencing. And I'm never comfortable with the legislature crossing the threshold and taking away the discretion of the judge and imposing their opinion of what they think the sentence should be. I really believe it should have been left to the judges.
All right. I'm sure that majority of a non-legal public would be disagreeing with you at this moment. And that would include myself.
Okay, good.
All right. We have, today, for example, in IRFM's newscast, there was a story in the 5:45 p.m. news that said a 37-year-old man, a gardener, was sentenced to 40 years for raping a woman at her home in Cherry Garden, St. Andrew. And this is coming right on the heels of a lot of discussion in the media and so on the uproar of in response to the situation in St. James and so on. Is this unusual? Because when I spoke to Franklin McKnight about this evening, I said to him, that strikes me as being a bit unusual in terms of the 40-year sentence. Is it a reaction, do you think? And I don't expect you to say yes or no, but what are your thoughts?
No, I can answer that too. Okay. I don't think it's a reaction. I think it's the news media that is reacting to it. But you do have judges handing down heavy sentences, not too heavy, light sentences, in the opinion of most persons, from time to time. But they become very, very newsworthy when certain events are taking place, such as the heightened emotionalism about rape at the moment.
And as a matter of fact, I see you nodding, Dr. Walcott, because last time you were here, we talked about the psychiatric conference, and that one of the things that came out of that conference in Kingston was how the news media was treating some of these events, in terms of our response to it. Remind us of what that was. That discussion was about.
Well,
at the conference.
Can't recall that offhand, but with regards to this particular topic, sensationalism sells, right? And it's always good to appeal to the emotional undertone of the public at any given time, because once you appeal to the emotions, then you get overall buy-in.
So do you think the media is commercial for them? It's a matter of selling? Because I'm in the media and I've been pretty emotional about this, and it has nothing to do with selling my program.
If you look at the emotional aspect of it, and let us look at what's been happening now. First of all, look at the psychology of rape itself. Rape is a violent crime, if I may.
That's correct.
Yeah, go ahead,
I've got your turn here.
Yes, go right ahead.
And it really has very little to do with the issue of sex and sexuality. It's really a issue of power and oppression.
That's true.
Because what happens in rape is that the perpetrator is forcibly submitting the victim in the ultimate form of submission, which is submitting them against their physiological workings. So it's forcing their bodies against them. So it's a violation in the most intimate sense. So it's establishing power and dominance over someone in the most ultimate of ways, over their person, right? Mm-hmm. And now, if you look at what happened when we had these events brought out in the media, what happened was a knee-jerk reaction by the public now to say that what we need to do is to find these perpetrators and do the same exact thing, which is to force submission of the will of the collective onto this person who is perpetrating the crime that they have done onto the victim. So if you look at the psychology of it...
But Dr. Walker, that was a public... No, that wasn't the media. That was a public responding through the media. No, but you said media. You said media.
Well,
but
let me take it back. The media is my friend.
It's not about friendship. I'm just trying to ensure that
I'm not blaming the media or anything, but I'm looking at what the reactions are. Now, if you look at it, and maybe I've missed it, right? And maybe I wasn't paying attention to the proper media coverage or where it came out, where persons have gotten together to focus on how they can make the lives of these young women better, what they can do to help, how they can share a social support, create a social support network for the victims, what they can do to ease the pain and burden that these persons are going through. All that has come down is that the public, let me not say the media, but from the public purview, what has been coming down is that what they are focused on is that they need to find out who the perpetrators are and then exact their sense of what justice is. And I use it loosely.
Yes.
The concept of justice, because it's really doing the same exact thing.
From a psychiatrist,
same psychopathology.
From a psychiatrist perspective, though, is that such an unusual response from the public to something like this? I'm talking about the St. James case in particular.
Is it unusual in this culture? No,
even outside of his culture, because we see a similar.
No, I would not say. In
the UK, when this is a similar response you get from the media when there is a vicious.
From the media, yes, because the media loves sensationalism. But you do have cultures, or you do have social environs in which once you have this heinous crime being committed, the focus is on providing support for the victims.
Right, and that is one of the reasons why you're here this evening, actually, to look at the psychology of rape.
Let me point out something very quickly, because rape comes under the issue of psychotrauma, and I'm sure that's what we want to get into. And it was a very interesting observation that one of the persons that worked with in psychotrauma, when she wrote a book on the whole aspect of psychotrauma, said that there are three principal participants in psychotrauma. There's the victim, the perpetrator, and the bystander. And usually the bystander sides surprisingly with the perpetrator, because the perpetrator doesn't ask for anything other than the emotional response. So it's either the bystander blames the victim or the bystander will blame the perpetrator, but the bystander does nothing to alleviate the suffering of the victim. And if you look at what's happening,
very good point, yes,
that's the exact same thing that's happening.
Very good point, and it's something that we want to explore further when we talk about the signals and the cues that we have missed over the years in terms of rape. Maybe not as vicious, the cues we have missed as a nation in terms of being a bystander, a watcher. We've missed, I think, so many of them over the years, because we find ourselves going back every time something like this happens to talk about, the little girl from Woodside and the little girl from over the hills and so on, for which whom we have not yet received any kind of justice in the courts, but also that kind of reaction that you have referred to from the public. All right, so let's go back to the law a bit, because you mentioned earlier, Linton Gordon, a little bit about the consent. Part of the definition of rape is without consent. And so how broad is that meaning? What does consent mean?
Consent means let's deal with this common one of a man and a woman. It means that one, the female is over 16 years old, meaning is over the age of consent. And secondly, that the person knowingly and willingly agreed to the sexual act. Knowingly and willingly. So that if she's tricked into it, it is raped. If she's forced into it, she's raped. If she's under the age, then even if she willingly agrees, for example, a 14-year-old girl who willingly and on consent to go into bed with a man or having sex with a man, the man commits rape nonetheless. She cannot consent.
She cannot consent, no. Because consent, in this case,
a condition precedent to consent is that you must be over the age.
You must be over the age of 16.
Yes.
All right. So that then consent is not just saying yes.
No,
to this. Because they say if you're tricked into it.
If you're tricked into.
What would tricked mean?
Well,
an example, for example.
There was a case in Portland once where a lady got up she had sex with a man, and when she turned on the light, she said she realized it was not her boyfriend. The man had tricked her, acted as though he were the boyfriend when he was not. And that's an example of a trick.
Right. So even though it would appear that she willingly had sex,
yes, that was not the person she wanted to have
tricked.
sex with.
In terms of Dr. Walcott, you want to respond to that? Because
I want a little more clarity on the issue of tricking, because in our culture there are several things that might come up. For example, if a man engages in sexual activity with a woman after he had led her to believe that he was not engaged in a relationship with someone else, or that he was not involved with someone else, does that constitute then tricking under the law? Because we have a lot of that in this culture.
No, if the lady is aware of who she's agreeing to go with.
Just want to make that clear.
It's not trick. Trick means she had no intention to get involved with this person.
Okay.
Duress is another example of force. If, for example, a relative is kidnapped and the lady is told, for your brother to be released, you will have to have sex with X. That is an example of duress. It was not volunteer.
There's also a situation in Jamaica, which is, widely spoken of in the media, of area dons and so on who sent into communities for young girls for sexual relations. That would also be considered rape, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, it would be. Because in that case, the parents are threatened that you have to leave the community if you don't send your daughter and that type of thing. So even if the daughter is an adult, 20 years old, and she is forced to go to the don in order for the family to remain safe in the community, that would be rape.
And, this is really coming out of left field, but then we probably have to, sooner or later, in terms of responding to what's happening in our own country, look at, kind of cast a net wider to talk about how individuals or communities are impacted by media, impacted by music, impacted by entertainment, how that influences girl or boy in terms of their response.
Well, we have a problem in Jamaica. Let me first of all make it clear that I do not support the persons who have been calling for castration and capital punishment for rape. I think that a society is going in the wrong direction where it descends into savagery because persons are acting like savages. That would be a grave error if the majority of us also join the savages who are committing these rapes. That would be wrong. We should seek to uplift the quality and standard of our behavior, including the way we punish wrongdoers.
Right. And when you talk about the quality and standard of our behavior, this is what I was getting to in terms of what's influencing the quality and standard of our behavior in the society.
I think a lot of what we are experiencing now is penetrating the society from cable, television, internet, and persons trying to put into practice various things they are seeing taking place through these media.
And did you use the word penetrating deliberately? Because this is where I'm going.
Yes. Because, and I'm not saying we should stop it. I don't think that we should have any restriction on the freedom of expression and freedom of information. I am saying we collectively in the schools, in the churches, in the communities need to balance the information, the attitude, and the application of information by young persons as they receive it, so that they do not see only the negative implication and the negative use of it, but they also see where they can adopt which is good and they can look and reject which is not good.
The tools to make that choice. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Walker?
Well, usually this is where I tend to pull away from the consensus of our little group.
Yes.
We like to find comforting things to identify that have caused this issue. But when you look at our society and our culture, we have had savagery in our society far longer than than television itself has existed. So our culture has come out of that. Yeah, we've had the architects of oppression and social engineering and all of these things have been ingrained in us for over 300, 400 years, and we've come through that. Now,
what about the psychic trauma of that?
Yes, the psychic trauma of all of that. So the issue is that I don't put much emphasis on the influences of external things, for example, like now the media. Yes, I agree with my learned colleague and lawyer who will defend me shortly in the public purview that you have to balance the information that's coming. But I think we have the ability to do that.
But that is the point, though. We have the ability to do that.
When you were talking earlier, you were saying that we may have missed cues about what's happening now. If you recall, 2 years ago, there was a huge uproar in the media about the findings that Professor Frederick Hickling at the time brought out.
There continues to be a huge uproar in the media right here on Irie FM, and particularly, and because you do this all the time because you're not a sex-wise listener, but I have to do this. I really do. That there continues to be a huge uproar in the media about the fact that we have disregarded as a nation the findings of the
when you
report.
Look, and I think a lot of the persons who were really dissonant didn't understand what was being said.
Remind our listeners what you're talking about.
The study found that 40% of the population suffered from personality disorder in a population study that was done using a tool that was created to do screening assessments of persons with personality disorder. Now, what most people do not know is that this tool was created to identify personality disorder, and it was based on the construct of a triad of phenomenology, or a triad of symptoms that arose.
But use simpler words for our listeners, man.
There were 3 areas that were identified that most persons with personality disorder had intense problems with. 1, power management. Yes. Psychosexual problems and dependency.
Right.
Now, if you look at rape really marries most of these issues, because rape is really poor power management expressed in a sexual way. And that is what it is. So when you look at that finding, and now you fast forward 2 years later to look at how not just the issue of the crimes that are committed, but also now, which is most important to me, is the societal response to the crimes. The societal response is not one where you would expect persons to be, in a way, supportive of the victims, or trying to care for the victims, or trying to help the victims to heal. The response is almost the same as the psychopathology of the rapist. It is to torture and to cause more mayhem. It is savagery. Yes. So you have savagery occurring in our community by a few individuals that leads now to savagery being executed by the large majority.
Against the background of a Hickling-Paisley report, and you were part of that research too, I'm quite sure. And I ask you again if that response is unusual. Or maybe not unusual, but is it a surprise that this is a response from the Jamaican society?
Well, clearly it's not a surprise, having worked in terms of looking at some of these issues. And as I said before, when you go even further to the history of our country, we have entrenched in our history these issues of oppression, severe oppression, of sexual depravity. These come out throughout a massive, almost a widespread part of
and
our
we
history.
haven't yet dealt with that, and I want to talk a little bit about that, the historical context. And we have been talking about the Thistlewood estate, for example, here in Jamaica, where rape, Thistlewood writes about this in his diary, where vicious and violent and heinous and horrific rapes were the order of the day right here on the island. We have to talk about psychic trauma, we have to talk about identity when we talk about rapes, but we're also dealing with the legal issues, because we hear so many questions coming out. We have them ourselves coming out of as part of our response to the horrific crime in St. James, in terms of what does the law say about rape in Jamaica. All right, in just a minute, we're going to be going to the Supreme Venture Super Lotto draw that's coming up. Listen up, you could become a super millionaire in the Supreme Venture Super Lotto draw coming up next right here on IRI FM. You're inside of Sex Wise, and we're looking this evening at the psychology of rape, and we're doing that within the context also of the legal issues pertaining to rape in Jamaica. We have Mr. Linton Gordon, attorney at law, in the studio helping us with that. And, of course, Dr. Jeffrey Walcott, no stranger to Sex Wise, is here to talk to us and help us to understand a little bit more about the psychology of rape. And this being attributed in part to a demonic force. And the best person is in the studio to help us to kind of sift through that. Dr. Jeffrey Walcott, my co-host and very special guest this evening. But we can't ignore that a lot of people are saying that there's something demonic. Mental disorder?
You know, the worst thing about when you look at the history of human beings, there is no evil creature that you could use your imagination to conjure up that could come close to the heinous acts that have been committed by ordinary run-of-the-mill humans throughout history.
That's coming from a psychiatrist.
Please don't let the wicked prevail. Don't let it be in vain. Another little baby gets slain. Robbing our future and who is to
All right, very, very serious issue as we try to sift through the problem situation, because we can't deny that there really is an issue to be dealt with here in Jamaica. Very dynamic, ongoing, and as Dr. Walcott has been saying to us, it's not necessarily a new thing. It's rooted in the historical context of Jamaica, in which Jamaica was enslaved.
Yes.
Right? So that, how do you connect? People say, you know, they tell us all the time, get over slavery already. I mean, move on.
Sure.
But how do you make that connection, though, from a psychiatrist's perspective, that some of what we're experiencing here are rooted in our history?
All right. Well, if you look at the major issues that are most prominent in terms of our culture as it is now, A, violence. B, the issue of sexual depravity, for lack of a better word. And when you look historically throughout the records, the Thistlewood Diaries is one, you see that there's always been a complex intertwine of these two forces throughout our history as a means of control and domination. So you've had the issue of the rapes that were committed as a way of establishing dominance and power and a control, helping to create the control structure within slave communities, and also the use of violence. Now, when you look at our culture now, and you see the disparity that has come forth, we are described as the most caring, loving people in the world. I think we were once rated the third happiest people on the planet. And yet
I thought we'd already dealt with that.
And yet still, though, we are in the top 5 most violent places in the world in terms of murders per capita. Yeah. So you see that there's this is actually so confusing that you can actually label this as pure madness, and those are the things that we're dealing with now. Even if you look at how we react to things, the knee-jerk reaction, the knee-jerk pull back to savagery, it's the issue of, and we've dealt with the big stick mentality in this culture on many different topics. That the automatic knee-jerk reaction is to use a big stick and whack somebody over the head. It is to submit people. Forced submission is a normal state that we regress to during any form of emotional distress.
Murder, violent crimes are more and more prevalent in Jamaica. Vicious and violent crimes in Jamaica. Do you think, in terms of how we respond to rape, that there is a different level, that somehow the response is different in terms of...
Let me tell you, let me say where I think we should go from here. The problem we're having with crime in Jamaica is that the persons who are committing these crimes are conscious of the fact that the likelihood of being caught and punished is relatively low or remote compared to most other countries. So the threat of being caught and punished is not the deterrent it should be. So I believe that rather than us concentrating on killing people or castrating people, men who commit rape, what we need to do is to tighten our investigative system, to bring a higher level of professionalism, honesty and integrity in the investigative process, and that in turn will bear fruit.
Because this is not... Go ahead, Dr. Walcott.
You and I would agree on that very strongly.
Okay.
But the problem with that is that approach does not address or does not appeal to the emotional response that keeps coming up, because we recognize that for that to happen, it takes planning, it takes time, and it is not a instant gratification to the emotional needs that the populace has now welled up. And that is part of the problem, and I think you have highlighted it and I'm highlighting it again, is that it takes a level of discipline and a level of forward thinking to be able to translate what has happened here into both the bolstering of the criminal justice system, as well as setting up support for victims of these crimes, and to shift away from the response that is one that brings us back into the dark ages of savagely beating or killing people. But you recognize the difficulty that has to overcome, because you have to then, before you can get there, we have to be able to deal with the emotional impulsivity of the population.
All right, before you respond to that, because you talk about the conviction rate, not just for rape, I take generally speaking,
yes.
But because we're talking about rape in particular, from your own perspective, you've been in the system for a very long time practicing. What can you tell us about the conviction rate for rape in Jamaica and how that might impact a person's emotional response to situations like these?
Okay. A rape is committed, there needs to be proper investigation. We have first world standards when it comes to DNA analysis and fingerprint, photographs, blood sampling and all of that. We are not using them at the standard we should be.
When you say
meaning the investigative process, the police in preparing the case. And there are many occasions when, because of technical reasons, evidence or material that could have been used to secure a conviction cannot be tendered or admitted in evidence, because certain things that should have been done from the commencement was not done. A good example of this is a 14-year-old is raped, and this actually happened, so I won't call any names or parish. The victim, 14 years, said after she was raped, she used her blouse to wipe up her private area. She also said that the rapist reached a climax in her and he never used a condom. That blouse was given to a police officer by the mother. It was put in a scandal bag, given to a police officer. For some reason, that blouse never reached the government lab. So there was no DNA, and it's likely that the DNA of the rapist could have been obtained from the sperm, wiped onto the blouse. Mm-hmm. And the question now of identification and other issues such as corroboration, which in fact a new law no longer requires. It's entirely if the judge feels, and I'll explain what corroboration is. All of those now being absent, there's a higher likelihood of the accused being acquitted, and the accused was acquitted. And I'm not saying he was guilty of doing it, because he was acquitted. The fact is, all the things that could have strengthened the case against him were not brought forward. And the question is whether this was deliberate, reckless, unprofessional on the part of the persons investigating. But the fact is, we do have such instances. So there are areas we can tighten and do better, even though we are not perfect, or we won't get to the perfect.
So while we have access to the technology and the resources and so on, do you see a situation where the training might be lax in terms of persons who are dealing
There's
with
ongoing training, and I have to say that there's improvement. We are improving in that area, although not as rapidly as I think we should. I think closer monitoring and management of the persons responsible for investigating sexual offences might very well be needed.
This newscast, this news story I mentioned to you earlier about the man who was sentenced to 40 years, DNA tests were conducted, and it was through DNA that this was done. So what is our Jamaica's capacity to tap into that knowledge of DNA?
Good. Acceptable by any standard. We do have the technology, and we have the equipment and the facility to analyze DNA and get results.
And I want to go back now to the conviction rate for rape.
Well, there is... Let me explain what happens in a rape case. First of all, it's a jury trial. So the judge is the judge of law, the jurors are the judges of facts. And if ever there's an area, in my experience, where there's a high level of unpredictability, it is in that area. I have known of instances where jurors are turned off by the complainant, that is the victim, because they're of the opinion that, quote unquote, a bad smaddy. So she comes, and the way she puts forward her story, they are turned off.
The way she puts forward as opposed
when she
to...
gives her evidence and how she said it occurred and what she was doing and all of that, they are turned off. Now, whether she was in fact raped or there was consent, these might be two adults, is another matter. But a lot of time persons are surprised to see that one is acquitted. There are some parishes in which it is felt that it is difficult to get a conviction for sexual offences because persons tend to suspect most of the complainants. In other parishes, it's different.
To what extent is this a cultural thing and a literacy situation in terms of a literate society?
I don't think it's anything to do with literacy. I think there might be an area of a cultural issue, but I also believe that there is deep down in our collective view that in many instances, subconsciously, persons believe that the victim conducted herself in a way to cause, quote unquote, cause her to be raped. It's very unfortunate, but that might be the reason.
Dr. Walker, this is not unique to Jamaica, right? In terms of how women are viewed in rape cases.
No, but it is unique to cultures that have a disparate view between the equality of men and women. And so it's not unique to us. And in fact, when you've looked at the issue of the psychotrauma of rape and these things, you realize that in fact you do have the concept of the blaming the victim, which is not something that's uncommon, and it's a reality because it does happen. Now, one of the things that we had spoken about, I think you had mentioned earlier, was to try to bring in the concept of mental disorder into this whole issue of rape and of psychotrauma invariably. When you look at the two main participants, the perpetrator and the victim, it's always comforting for us to try and label the perpetrator or to say that there must have been something wrong with the perpetrator. In most instances, when you do any form of psychological analysis of persons who perpetrate crimes, heinous crimes, you rarely find any evidence of mental disorder. You might find in some cases that you will have one or two persons having either severe personality disorder or other things, but it's very uncommon. It's when you look at the perpetrator, they're usually normal, healthy, minded individual, as normal can be, because normal itself is subjective. But
within our context, with the 40%, what is the likelihood?
Well, like I said, in some of these instances, you'll have personality disorders. And when you look at the issue of rape, really you have some psychological misconstruence of how to deal with power issues and how to deal with the issue of authority and dominance over another person. But if you look now at the international literature, when you look at the victim, the prevalence of mental disorders in the victims are close to 50 to 60%. And if you look up, we've gone almost halfway into the program, and I think we've spent the majority of the time discussing the issue of punishing the perpetrator and finding ways and means of tightening the way so that these people can be punished. And we really...
No, we're not talking about punishment. Oh, please, we're talking about justice.
We've spent justice,
it is justice, because...
But we spent a lot of time focusing on the perpetrator and not realizing that there's a huge problem that presents itself now with regards to the well-being, the mental health and well-being of the victims. When you look at a figure like 50% developing some form of mental disorder, 50 to 60% of rape victims, I think the only other severe psychotrauma that gives you something close to that is to be a prisoner of war. So when you look at that in itself, that's a huge thing that we have to find a way to deal with, to provide the psychological support for victims of these crimes, to provide the social support for these persons, and to provide healthy avenues for them to heal.
And really, you're preempting it, because we really do want to get there in terms of, so after the rape, then what? But we really need to get to the legal issues also, because this is something that we are very concerned about in Jamaica. And so we want some of the questions answered, DNA, etc. and so on. And then now we want to quickly talk now about, and this is where we're getting in Jamaica. And so we want some of the questions answered, DNA, etc. and so on. And then now we want to quickly talk now about, and this is where we're getting into the areas you've mentioned, Dr. Walcott, to talk about the legal protection for the victims of rape. What kind of protection do they have in Jamaica?
Well, there's a protection, you could call it, that victims have, which is not widely used, and that is that they can sue, and we have done it in the past, they can sue the person who assaulted them. And it is not always that they are men of straw. They are persons who have good assets, who have been convicted of rape, but the victim tends to say, let me forget it and try to move on. The government provides some form of counseling and victim support system for victims of sexual offenses. I am not in a position to comment on its effectiveness because I am not aware of how well it is working. I just want to bring something to listeners' attention, and it is that the new act provides that a husband can commit the offense of rape, and the husband is put just about on the same level as a stranger raping a woman where the standard of proof is concerned. Mm-hmm. Because it states that if he has sex with his wife without her consent, or knowing that she does not consent, but recklessly not caring whether or not proceed to have sex with her. And the examples given are what I mentioned earlier: extortion by physical assault or threat, or the fear of physical assault, are obtained by false and fraudulent misrepresentation. So a husband can be convicted of rape for misrepresenting himself to his wife and causing her to have sex.
Can a wife be convicted of rape of her husband?
No, there's no provision, but it would be some form of indecent assault.
Right, so there's some gender bias in the in the law. And I'm speaking as a woman. God, I know I can come out a little fire from it, but anyway, we can move on a little.
It might be if you now get a strict interpretation of rape. Rape has in it an element of penetration, because the other sexual offenses. About the vagina. Yeah, well, the other areas that I mentioned, I think the act refers to them as grievous sexual assault. When they speak of you can use any other part of you or an external, such as a pen, to penetrate someone's vagina or anus. But a woman can be charged with aiding and abetting rape if she takes whatever step is necessary to ensure that rape or any other sexual offense takes place.
All right, and to quickly flash back to the protection for the victim, and I want to speak specifically about media coverage. I was watching the media coverage, listening to the media coverage, yes, for example, of what happened in St. James, and as a trained journalist, I was shocked at some of it. I was shocked, for example, that the house was shown, because the way I was trained, you don't show the victim's house.
That is correct.
And you don't show anything to identify, so that the public can identify the victims. So what is our situation?
Let me say what is happening now. You are correct that all efforts should be made to ensure that the victims are not identified. And that should include not showing pictures of their home, disclosing their address, their connection, or anything. I believe that the multiplicity of media houses is leading to competition amongst members of the media, and persons are now pecking the threshold, going over, seeing how far they can go without being reprimanded, and that might be where such inappropriate practices
I think this is a case for the Broadcasting Commission, and I think not just this specific case, because we see it all the time.
Yes.
We hear about St. Anne's Bay, we hear about so and so, and victims are literally identified. I read in a newspaper a story where the young girl, the 8-year-old, said, "I don't want to live in Jamaica anymore." Now, if she was protected, then she probably wouldn't have had that fear that, the entire community or everybody knows it. So, but is there a law that says we've got to protect them? That we're not supposed to do these things?
Yes.
Because journalistically there is.
Yes, there's a requirement that they should not. And in fact, these cases the trial of these cases is held in camera, meaning the public is not allowed in and the media is not allowed in. And if the media is allowed, the judge directs that, apart from mentioning the bare facts and the result of the trial, the persons involved are not to be, certainly the victim should not be named, nor the address, nor the house, nor anything that could cause the public to know who the victim is.
What about a sexual history in courts? Is that a consideration for us of the victim in the court?
At a trial, the defense counsel can attack the credibility and the reputation of the complainant or the victim, as you call the person,
by bringing into evidence.
Yes, but again, the media ought not to make that public.
All right, and so from a psychiatrist perspective now, because here we're talking about the protection of the survivors. Thank you very much, Linton, because I kept saying victim, and at this point we're talking about survivors, persons who have gone through some really terrible ordeal.
And I think we're probably looking at it very simplistically in terms of exposing them to the public and having people know who they are. And what we're really not understanding is how deep the damage is done.
Explain that to us. Yes.
Every time when you have someone who has been psychologically traumatized to the extent that these survivors have been, you have a concept that's known as post-traumatic stress disorder, or the psychological disorder that emanates from severe trauma. And a part of that is a triad of the re-experiencing the event, the avoidance or emotional numbing in terms of the response to the event, and the hypervigilance that the event is going to happen again. When you look at how you manage those issues. The first most important stage is the establishment of psychological and emotional and physical safety. Safety has to be established. After safety is established, then you go through the process of exploration of the...
I just wanted to find out what safety meant.
Safety means that the person is in a physical state where they are no longer fearful that this event can reoccur, and that they're in an emotional and psychological state and social state where they themselves are confident or feel empowered that they can explore the issues relating to the trauma. That has to be established, because when you're now exploring issues of the trauma in a therapeutic way, the survivors go through the process of mourning. If safety is not established, when you explore the trauma, what you're doing is not therapeutic anymore. What you're doing now is re-traumatizing the person. And if you think about the legal processes now that come into play with regards to a crime of this nature, you have the survivor having been violated by a perpetrator, having to go to first the police officer and recount the episode, then going to a medical doctor, recounting the episode again, then going before a court, and it goes on and it goes on. And each time they have to go through that event again. If the proper psychological support structures are not put in place, what you're then doing is causing re-traumatization of this person.
What would the proper psychological structures entail?
First, it entails having psychological and psychiatric professionals intervening at an early stage to do a proper assessment of the person's psychological state and well-being, and then to provide the level of support, whether it is a pharmaceutical intervention, psychological intervention, or social intervention, or all three of
I saw an interview with the 8-year-old published in the newspapers, and I was shocked. This happened. This is in my profession, and I was really shocked because I thought, how did this journalist get to this 8-year-old so soon after the rape? So was there no safety net? Nothing. How did that happen? That was a second rape, as far as I'm concerned. No, I was not going to take it back. I kind of feel like the second rape.
Well, I think that was I thought that was a rhetorical question because.
Okay. I thought you were disagreeing.
No.
So how did that happen, Linton? How could something like that happen?
Well, I'm not sure, but I share your concern. I think that's a serious violation of the privacy of an 8-year-old. I don't know what was the position of the parents or the guardian during all of that, but surely she should not have been the subject of any interview in those circumstances.
Unless the interview was with a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
Someone with a view to treating
who understands. So, Dr. Walker, when you talk about the psychological intervention and how soon that should have been...
Well, let me give you probably a practical example. While I was at our lovely parish here and working, I know our psychiatric services had a very close relationship with the sexual trauma unit at the St. Anne's Bay Hospital, and we would actually have direct referrals to our psychiatric clinics, or even because in most cases some of these persons did not want to come to clinic, but they would have direct referrals to be seen by either psychiatrists or psychologists within the 24-48 hours of the crime being committed. And so what we would then be able to do is to start putting in place the psychological safety nets that would be needed to actually get the person to work through some of the emotional pain that they're having at the time. And it's important to understand that when we're going through this issue, our primary focus in the early stages is to get the client to that level of emotional and psychological safety.
Are they removed usually from the situation, from the geographical, the environment?
It varies, because in most cases, in some of these instances, it happened outside of their normal social environment. So naturally, these persons would try to avoid those areas in some respect. And so the mainstay is to be able to get them to understand or work with them so that they feel a sense of safety within their social network. So it's important to bring into play the family members, other supportive members of their community, if necessary, to give them a sense of belonging, of safety.
What is the role of the supporting institutions? For example, here's this 8-year-old who was in hospital. How do the journalists get to her in the hospital to do an interview? Is beyond me. I remember when the little girl was kidnapped here in St. Anne, and we were on this story for the entire night. We actually went to the hospital and so on, and at St. Anne's Bay. And interestingly enough, there was the professionalism. There was something else, because we weren't able to even go close to her. We were able to look at her, but not to go near enough to her to ask her any questions that we wanted to. But we just wanted to ensure that she was getting the proper care. So that should be our first priority as journalists, right? We're obviously not thinking that way in a lot of cases. But what's the role of the supporting institutions, hospital, and so on?
You love putting me on the spot, don't you?
There you go again.
that really should be the role of us as a society, not just the institutions. Our role is really, and I've been harping on it from the beginning of this program, that our role is really to provide protection, care, and support for the persons who are the ones who have been victimized, who are the ones in pain, who are the ones suffering. It is for us to band together when something like this happens, to be able to provide the support that these persons need for them to not get rid of the pain and suffering that they're having, but to at least help to alleviate some of the unnecessary pain and suffering. And if you think about the emotions that are surrounded a rape, for example, the emotions that are surrounding a rape are humiliation, guilt, anger, sadness. As a communal group, whether it being in a hospital, the police force, we can alleviate some of these negative emotions just by the way we interact with the persons who have been victimized. And I think that is probably one of the key issues that we have to do. And we have to focus on protecting their psychiatric and psychological well-being. And the issue is, even as an institution or an individual, leave the judgment and the justice for the perpetrator up to the designated facilities that have been put in place in our society to deal with the justice and punishment of the perpetrators. The police.
I'm going to ask you to back up.
You're
telling the public that we need to leave this to a system that is broken.
What we have to focus on.
So is that unrealistic, Dr. Walcott?
What we have to focus on.
I know you're not answering my question, but you can
answer your question.
Okay,
what
there you
we
go.
have to focus on. What we have to focus on is to providing the healing, support, and care that the persons who are actually the ones who have been suffering, because we tend to internalize this concept. You talk about the journalists showing the homes, and everybody gets angry and feels that it's them, that something has been done to. Yes, and we keep forgetting. It's as if we are seeing the home and we're seeing the victims, and we don't even think about the victims as the fact that these people are suffering and they need our help. What we think about is they are the new flag posts that we can have so that we can go and exercise our anger and our frustration and chop off somebody's head or kill people on the road and do whatever.
So as a psychiatrist, what would be your advice to the Jamaican public who are up in arms about the viciousness of this act and any other rape act in Jamaica? We tend to do that.
That's very simple. If you are up in arms and you are angry and you are feeling emotional, band together, form your groups, and find out how you can provide support and how you can provide caring, healing environment for the people who have been suffering. That's who you should focus on. Help them. They're the ones that need the help. They're the ones suffering. Everybody's been banding together to find the perpetrator, to kill this person, to kill that person.
But that is also important, not to kill, but to find.
No, well, look, let us try and, be objective when it comes to how we react to these matters. The judicial system in any country is not perfect. In ours, it is not perfect. But there's no better system in place now to determine guilt than the judicial system. There's no better system. There's no fairer system, there's no more reliable system than
once you get there. Once you get there, because you talk about the investigative process.
Yes.
And there are concerns about that aspect.
Well, let me deal with the investigative process. We can criticize the police, and rightly so in many instances, but there is no better system when it comes to apprehending and putting before the court a suspect other than the system of the constabulary in this country. There is the right of citizen arrest, but notice the word is arrest, not execution. If we resort to a gut feeling or a hearsay is him do it, then we would have abandoned an objective system in which evidence that is him do it is tested, cross-examined, and then assessed by a jury or a judge before relied upon, to one of we are in the bar having a drink and a group of men rushing by, is him do it, and we grab our machete, join the group and go up there and chop up him.
In a sense,
and then it turns out it is not him or him who do it. We now kill an innocent person, and we go on to commit crimes when we should be preventing crimes.
There's also, 1 minute, Dr. There's also an occasion, though, an opportunity in situations like these to have dialogue and to look again at the processes.
Yes, and there's another danger. There's another danger, which is a danger to all of us. Once the determining factor is there's a shout that is him do it, then you can be set up. Maybe you're not liked in the community and a crime is committed and a group of 4 persons start to chase you and say, he is the one who did it. The mob joins, kills you, and those persons who never liked you and who used the opportunity to set you up, they would have managed to kill an innocent person by just shouting, is him do it.
And what does it say about the individual members of the mob outside a group thing?
And it comes back to what I'm saying. If members of the mob have information that is him do it or him do it, then what they should do, if it is somebody they can capture without harming the person and hand the person over to the police, that is quite legitimate. But in any event, they should make reports to the police, give statements, and those form part of a file to be put before the court where the man is put on trial, and the fairest system we have to determine guilt in this country is used to determine his guilt, because it is better.
Dr. Walcott is going to stop.
I know it is better
yes.
for the guilty to walk than for the innocent to be punished for a crime that he never committed.
Couldn't agree with that more. Yes, go ahead. That's what you
but here's
what
the
you
other
wanted
issue.
to say.
But here's the issue, which is very much in agreement with this issue, is that the person who is most likely to provide the evidence to identify who the perpetrator of the crime is the survivor. And in most cases or most instances, the process of having to go through the judicial fair system is traumatic. So if you want to improve your conviction rate, if you want to improve the efficacy of the judicial system, we as a people should not then take justice into our own hands, but we should provide the social support and encouragement and the backing for the persons who are survivors of the crime to be able to take on the judicial process and follow it through because in some instances they crumble and they fall apart, and this is why cases fall apart. And if we are really that interested in justice and fairness, then we should use our emotional knee-jerk reaction or emotional excitement at this phase, or rage or anger, and focusing it on helping to provide the support, the empowerment for these persons, for these survivors, for them to go through and say, I have been wronged, I know this is the person that did it, I have the support of the whole community, the whole country behind me, and I am going to go through the judiciary system and ensure that the person is punished in a fair trial.
You know, and I'm listening to all of this and I'm thinking, how come we don't know so much? How come there's so much that we do not know as a people, as a nation? And this is why I talk about a literate society earlier on, because literate society, we're not even talking about if you can read and write so much, you know, as if you have knowledge of the issues that concern you, and to what extent do we not have that kind of a knowledge? To what extent are we ignorant of the processes of the law, ignorant of the victim support that is needed when in situations like this? To what extent are we not having this dialogue, and are we taking too much for granted in thinking that our people know when they are not necessarily equipped with that knowledge?
Well, look, the persons who form themselves into a mob and attack who they believe has committed a crime. I am prepared to say that those persons are aware of the procedure that should be followed.
And let me just make it clear. Let me make it very clear that I'm not talking about the mob, because I'm totally on the same page with you on the mob. I'm just talking about a wider knowledge against the background of supporting the survivors.
Let me make a few comments on that. It is not likely that someone who has not been raped would have known of victim support and all of that. It's not likely. It is there. It comes in the media from time to time. Mention is made of it, but people probably just move on, reading the news or listening. But where victims are concerned, the judges, to their credit, always ask for the victim support person in court. I've always seen that done. And that person would take the victim and commence working with the victim. Now, as I said earlier, I'm not going to comment on how effective it is, but I do see them being in touch with each other in all instances where there are rapes. Secondly, what the medical persons do in terms of counseling and all of that, I am also aware that victims are put in touch or in contact with such persons. I am not in a position to comment on how effective it is. I can only say that I am aware that the facilities exist.
Dr. Walker talked about the process earlier of, going to the police, going to the courts and so on. And one of the things that came to me then was the length of time that it takes in Jamaica to try some of these cases. We have had many.
I would agree with you. Both in the civil division of the courts and in the criminal division, I think it's fair to say perhaps the court in which things proceed the quickest to a finality is the Court of Appeal at the moment. And surprisingly, that court has only 2 divisions. And I know that efforts are being made to have a 3rd division. But I think they have a challenge with the physical facility in the Court of Appeal. In the resident magistrate court, take St. Anne, for example. 50% of the courts in St. Anne have been closed over the past maybe 8 years. So that whereas there were 6 courts in St. Anne, there are now 3. Moneague has been closed, Cave Valley has been closed, and Oteres has been closed, leaving Brownstown, Claremont, and St. Anne's Bay. So that there's a physical challenge. One of the rooms used for court in St. Anne's Bay is totally inadequate. You're sitting arm's length from the judge. your papers are on the table where the judge can see them. Not that the judge is inquisitive, but counsel's brief is very private, and the judge doesn't want to see it, and it shouldn't be so placed where the judge can see it. We shouldn't be so close to the judge that when we are speaking to each other and might be whispering inappropriate language in each other's ear, the judge hears it. That is not to be done. So that the dignity of the court is compromised because of the lack of facilities.
And then even those who are waiting to be called.
Yes,
I walked in
they have
one
to wait outside on that tent and all that.
Where young children
yes.
are waiting with adults. And that was something that struck me the last
that
time I went to a court in St. Anne's Bay.
The Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court, the old NCB Bank on Barry Street, there's a bridge being built across the road to extend that. And I gather that there will be about 8 more Supreme Court judges, so that hopefully if that comes on stream next year, the volume will be reduced. The efforts have been made by the Chief Justice, certainly in St. Anne. She has posted judges here for a longer period, and we have made some dent in the criminal list here, but it's now in the region of 160. And I can recall that when there were only 20 cases on the list.
And we're talking about St. Anne. Can we extrapolate to other parishes?
It is throughout the island. There is a growing number of serious crimes, and the list is growing. Even in St. Thomas, where the list was very nominal, that list has gone up to about 60, I think, which is frightening because it's a small parish physically and population-wise. But the solution is more judges, more physical facilities, and more prosecutors.
And that is why I said earlier, how do we use this opportunity? Because obviously it's hard to call this an opportunity, really. I mean, wrong choice of word. But this particular situation, which we find ourselves in as a nation now, where so many of our women are being viciously and violently raped, how do we use this to begin the conversation about changing that system, about reforming that system, about putting courts in places, judges in place to change, so that we can have cases go through the courts faster, so that justice appears to be, as opposed to...
Well, look, the High Court judge coming to do serious cases, we call it circuit, that judge has a discretion to give priority to certain cases. For example, the circuit court that we had in St. Anne in August dealt exclusively with gun court cases. The judge was here for 3 weeks, and the cases that were focused on were the gun court cases, because there was an increase in such cases in the parish. Now, nothing is wrong with, in any parish, the judge, the Chief Justice can post a judge there for 3-4 weeks and to say, look, tell all the lawyers that the sexual offenses cases, especially those for children, involving children, you could set them for an August, which is the school holiday, and you could say to all the attorneys and so, yes, it's a legal holiday, but we are going to give priority to these so that it does not disrupt the school period for the children. I understand
that perfectly, but I'm saying that if you do that, you still set back some. You know, there are some that you have to set aside.
But you have that discretion to give certain cases priority depending on the requirement and the circumstances. It can be done.
In terms of addressing our situation, which is... We talk about rape in this program because it is sex-wise, but obviously it's a complex situation. It's not just about rape. Yes. We have a problem in terms of crime and violence in Jamaica. But in terms of addressing that, there are so many things that are connected, including the legal, connected to the psychologists and the psychiatrists, connected to us, the communities and so on, that I would like to see, and I don't know if this is happening or if it's going to happen, but I like to see that out of all of it, after we take off the black and we finish marching and remaining silent for 2 minutes, that we begin now to have a dialogue with all the relevant stakeholders and to say, how do we fix this? How do we begin to fix it? Is that so difficult to do? Because there's a lot of conversation, a lot of talking, but I don't I'm not getting that feeling that we're approaching this from the kind of multi-dimensional context, within that context that we're supposed to be doing. Are we missing something?
Well,
and why did you laugh?
Because that's an interesting question. Are we missing something? One of the things that we have to deal with when we're working with getting people to change their behavior, especially when you deal with persons who have maladaptive behavioral patterns, you realize that most people justify everything that they do, whether it's right or wrong. It's usually something that we justify. When you talk about stakeholders and talk about getting people together and getting persons to fix it, one of the primary or the first stages of changing any behavior is for us to develop insight. Insight is the understanding of how we play a role in enhancing or in perpetuating the pathology.
That's a point.
The last time that was brought up in terms of getting us to develop this insight, you saw the emotional reactions that it
that was a values and attitudes thing, or
no? I'm going back to the 2-year-old study on the prevalence study of personality disorder.
Oh yeah, but the values and attitudes was before that, and then Vision 2030 is about changing the mindset. But it's just, there's so much talk
we have
about
to
it.
Accept, first of all, that we have in our society, across a wide stretch of our society, serious psychopathology that exists in our people. We can choose whether or not we want to agree on the fact that it emanates from our psychotraumatic history or not. That is something we can debate. But the evidence is that it does exist. That's not debatable. Mm-hmm. And it is not confined, as most people would like us to put it, and confine it in small geographic areas, as we see in the social engineering experiments that we have in the Kingston, that the concept of these segregated communities that we blame for everything, and negate to say that we are the ones that have actually isolated these persons from the wider Jamaican society. That's a whole different debate. When 70 people can be killed and we don't even bat an eye about the issues surrounding the deaths of those persons as if they don't exist. Once we are able to identify that this psychopathology spreads throughout the length and breadth of this country, in all classes, in all colors, in all creeds, and it is for us to come together as a nation and collectively readjust the way we interact with each other in the basis of our power issues, or dependency issues. When you look at, there's no other country in the world where a person can come out on national television and say that they want their elected official to go and tell a hotel that they must find them a work. And we accept that as normal. This is serious pathology that we are accepting as normal. Once we identify that these things exist and they are intertwined. So whether you're on top or down the bottom, the pathology exists not because of one or the other, but because of the interrelation between the two.
And that's the point we're making.
That's what we have to focus on, and that's what we have to change. Which means everybody is at fault.
But that's one point, isn't it?
Everybody has to change.
Exactly. So I'm saying that, what about this multifaceted approach? You see, so that is a psychiatrist area which we have to bring to the table. Then there is a legal area which we have to bring to the table, and the political, and the criminal, and we have to bring, I think, all the bits and pieces to the table, and that starts with the community. It starts with us. It starts with us as individuals, and it starts within our family. But we can't just start in the middle to say, all right, first of all of us have, we have a problem, a personality disorder problem in Jamaica. So let's just start there. Is that the place we start from? Is that what place we start from? How do we begin to approach this problem, Mr. Linton Gunn? Because
well,
that's
look,
the point.
There is no doubt that the first step to dealing with a crime is to deal with the person who has committed the crime. That's the first step. So I am totally for dealing with the person who has committed the crime. Now, the first step to deal with the person is to take the person into some form of accountability, which we call a charge and place him before the court, and the court either keep him in custody or admit him to bail, but a process is commenced against him. Now, as I said earlier, what will happen at the trial will be determined by how well that process is gone through, how he's dealt with and all that. Now, all the other variables, whether the person who committed the crime is mad, mentally challenged, vicious, is a habitual criminal, or whoever he is, the first step is to bring him into the system. What is happening is that too many persons are escaping the system because of a multiplicity of reasons. Some, as you mentioned earlier, are dons, untouchable. Some are uptown, wealthy, and they can contact the mother of the victim and make an arrangement and, quote-unquote, buy out the case. Some are bad men who the victim prefers not to report it for fear of her life. So there are all sorts of variables that we're faced with, and we have to get at them one by one and get them out the way. We need a system which, once the crime is committed, the process of bringing the person into the accused or the wrongdoer or the person who committed the crime, to bring him in the system. Persons are not being brought in for a variety of reasons, and that is an incentive for others to try it. That is where we need to start. We need to reach a stage where we can put a chair in the square in Montego Bay marked for rapists, and nobody wants to go and sit on it. Mm-hmm. When we are there, then we start to send the proper message.
All right, it is really clear to us just by talking to each other, and I'm quite sure you've been listening to the conversation we've been having, that we have nobody's denying that obviously we really do have a serious situation in Jamaica, and how we deal with it though, we hear the psychiatrist's perspective, and we're hearing the legal officer's perspective. So what does this do to us now? It tells us that there are so many different areas that we really do have to seriously bring to the fore, and before we even begin to think of addressing this, it has to be a network approach where we include as opposed to exclude. How do we begin to do this? Stop talking about it and just act. I think there's a whole lot of talking and too little action. But we, at this late hour, I think we can open the phone lines to see if there's anything you want to say. Do you want to ask a question? Do you want to make a comment? Do you want to add to anything else that you've heard here this evening? And the numbers that you can do that at, 974-5079, 5051, 5043. And 1-888-991-4152. You can also email me at andrea.williams@irfm.net. We have just half an hour left in the program for this interactive part of the discussion. Or you can send us a quick tweet, Andrea Williams G, or on Facebook at Andrea Williams. So the phone lines are now open, 974-5079, 5051, 5043, or 1-888 991-4152. Right after this. Let's go to the phone lines. Hello, caller. Good evening. Welcome to Sex Wise.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm listening to the radio, and this is really a wonderful topic that you guys are discussing tonight. Mr. Leighton Gordon, he has opened my eyes so much to we think about the surface of things, and we don't look so deep within, and to see that we're having a very serious problem. And Mr. Leighton Gardner has opened my eyes. Everybody, as a matter of fact, on the panel has opened my eyes to so much. And, I want to personally thank you for having this program.
Thank you. Which was a concern of mine that there's so much that we collectively as a nation that we're ignorant of, and we've been asking these questions. And I think that the idea is for us to, 'cause information is not knowledge, and there's a whole lot of information out there. But for us, but part of knowledge is actually part of doing. So what do we do now? Now that we've had all this information, what do we do with it now?
All of us as a nation collectively have to come together and play our part. Each of us have to take responsibility. We have to play our part. We have to acknowledge. We have to do the right thing always, you know.
Yes.
In all of this, we just have to play our part. All of us as a nation, each and every one, each individual, yes. We have to play our part.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for calling.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, as we continue to take your telephone calls for Dr. Jeffrey Walcott or Mr. Linton Gordon, we are discussing the issue of rape. We're looking at the psychology of rape, but we're also looking at the legal situation here in Jamaica to our own particular context. Hello, caller, good evening. Welcome to Sex Wise.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening to your guests. I would like to
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes,
good afternoon.
thank you for having me. I would like to say that, you know, justice in Jamaica is justice denied. Justice delayed is justice denied. Mm-hmm. Because I don't believe that people in Jamaica are getting real justice. Because when you look at the situation is what's going on with the crime and the unemployment, what do we expect? Some rapists come out and rape somebody? Yes. Are we sure that they are the ones that really do the rape? Are the justice system and the police system adequate to say these are the persons?
Mr. Gordon, do you understand the question she's asking?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so I'll have Linton Gordon respond.
All right. There is no perfect system on earth. And the only way persons not present at a crime can say for sure who did it is to get what is called reliable evidence.
Mm-hmm.
A person is convicted on evidence that appears to the jury to be reliable.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge will say to the jury, you must feel sure and sure beyond a reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm.
If there is some reasonable doubt as to the guilt of the person, you should acquit the person.
Okay.
And therefore, it's a system that protects everyone, because if you leave it to belief, then you will do injustice.
Mm-hmm.
So that even though we might not be happy with the results that we get from the system, it's the best system, the fairest system, and the system that ensures that the thing called justice is dispensed. Now, there will be instances where people will pervert or interfere with the process of justice. And from time to time, you will hear that persons are charged for perverting justice, meaning trying to get a result that is warped, that is unfair, and that is not what should be the result if the proper evidence was put forward. But on a whole, we should rely on the system, because imperfect as it is, it's the best system for our safety.
And you know, raping or rapists, do you believe that what they are forcing the hand of the government now is to bring back hanging? Because these vicious crimes...
I don't believe in hanging, Mama. I don't believe in capital punishment. I think it's a dangerous and a primitive way to apply a legal system. I think that the capital punishment being such an act of finality, if it turns out that the person was set up or that there was an error, as is happening in the United States now, where hundreds of persons, especially poor black Americans, are now being released because DNA has shown they were not the ones who committed the crime. Several of them have been put to death innocently.
Yeah.
Yes, but
So let us be very careful of that one.
yes,
All right.
but in the meanwhile, those you have to be suffering and they through for people to put their case forward.
There are
Yeah.
differences,
Suffering.
challenges, and suffering, but I still don't think the solution is the death penalty.
So you think the government should do it on a conscience vote? Or put it to the people? Because the people is the one who doing the design.
Even if everyone votes for it, I maintain my opposition to it.
You're not for it.
Yes.
All right, caller. Thanks for
Yeah,
calling.
man.
You're
Right.
obviously for it. We can hear that.
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're not?
No,
Could
I
have fooled
think
me.
that There are other ways and means that you can do this thing. But I think that the justice system, before we go to the final to hang the person, we must decide whether or not the justice system or the jurisprudence is fair to both the guilty and the victim.
All right. Thanks for calling.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, as we continue to take your telephone calls here on Sexwise at 974-5079, 5051, 5043, and 1-888-991-4152. And on Facebook, someone is asking, is actually saying that rape, sometimes women ask for rape because of how they're dressed, and we'll deal with that in a little while. Hello, caller. Good evening. Welcome to Sexwise.
Present, good evening, Andrea. I don't know if this related to the sex-wise, but based on the justice system. And listening to the program, actually, I was thinking before the program, hearing the program, that I went in my vehicle, and hearing the program on this justice system.
Yeah.
I think most of the time the justice system in Jamaica provocate and bring out certain things in people that basically they feel as if there is no justice system. And when people, as I heard before, that because of poverty or the donemanship or of certain things, then I guess people take up the system, take up the whole justice system in their own hand and do certain things, which should not be right.
Right. So what's the point? What's the point you want to make? Are you saying that you think the justice system is failing?
The justice system is very much failing.
All right.
Because if you're going to court, let's say that you have someone owing you some money, or someone charged for rape, or what have you, and you have all that clue, you have all that thing set up. Based on the lawyers and all that thing that doing, is as if you cannot ever get your point out any at all, because the justice system is there to convict you more than they convict the person that is guilty of the crime.
All right, we're going to leave it at that and see if Mr. Gordon will respond to that briefly. I know that's a whole other program. Thanks for calling.
Well, look, again, I will have to agree that our justice system is not perfect. As I said earlier, it's not disposing of cases as quickly as we would love to, but it is still the most reliable system to resolve differences, legal differences between persons, and the issue of whether crimes have been committed in this country.
Hello, caller. Good evening. Welcome to Sexwise.
Good evening, Miss Andrea.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm all right.
Yes.
I just like to make a little point that too much of the ladies sometimes, they kind of just half naked on the streets, ma'am, but that don't really have a point that the gentleman should want to rape the woman them still. But if them wear proper clothing and kind of take care of them body, secure them body more,
Well, let me have Dr. Walker respond to that. Dr. Walker?
Going to respond to that.
You're not going to respond to that?
Because I don't want to be rude. My views have always been right, and I'm a very strong believer in women's rights and equality. And in my firm view, unless a woman is violating the indecent exposure laws where she can be taken into by the police for revealing parts of her anatomy that she shouldn't under the law, A woman can wear whatever she wants, and she can move in whatever way she feels, and she can gyrate her hips in the most provocative ways imaginable. It still gives nobody the right to violate her body against her will under any premise and under any circumstance. Do you ever even have the thought of conceivably justifying rape because of some stupid and ridiculous concept in your mind of what you think a woman should do? That's the whole point of rape.
Sir?
Yes, sir. So,
let me share something with you.
okay.
The topical rape incident now,
Yes,
those
sir.
persons were in their home. They were not out on the street, skimpily dressed. Most of the rapes I am aware of, they were not done against persons who were skimpily dressed, but persons were kidnapped in motor cars, properly dressed, going to work, coming from work, in their homes, and there's absolutely no evidence at all, nothing empirical, to show that the persons who are skimpily dressed are the ones who are being raped. So I think that that's a figment of somebody's imagination, but it has no grounding in fact, science, or law.
But, sir, in a little point, have you ever seen some of the ladies when them come out on the street? Like,
Yes, but none of those have ever been. There's no evidence that those are the ones being raped. Old ladies are raped, people coming from church, little children, 4-year-old, 14-year-old, 8-year-old. There's no evidence that it's the persons who dress like they're going to dance at a go-go club are the ones being raped. There's nothing to show that those are the ones. So I don't think there's any correlation between the way the ladies are dressed and the victims that come about.
Well, thanks you. I just like to share a little comment, like, to the ones them like who have that feeling in their mind that they must remember that.
All right, I think your credit just ran out. All right, I want to throw something inside, because it seems to me, we mentioned this earlier, that this is one of the myths, and also to say that a lot of people, there's an attitude in Jamaica to women being raped, and
Yeah.
that can seep into the jury pool.
No, I don't think. Well, I can't say no or yes, but what I would say is that I have never heard any defense counsel putting forward the issue of it's because of how you were dressed that you induce rape.
One sec, caller, and I'm not talking from that angle. I'm talking about from what? Because, sometimes people say, you said disregard certain things, but you go into with what you've been socialized.
You mean the jurors themselves saying,
yes.
You dress that way there?
In what they think.
I hardly think that would be a consideration.
How prevalent is this view? And we'll come back to it in Jamaica, especially in the church. And I will come back to that shortly. Hello, caller, good evening. Welcome to Sex Wise.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Sorry to have kept you holding.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Andrea.
Yes.
Good night.
Good night.
I'd like to make a point.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not about sex rights, really.
Yes.
I want to, like this, the retirement cycle in Jamaica, I think is giving a big problem.
What kind of cycle?
The retirement then.
The retirement age?
Yeah.
Would I get another conversation?
No, I say it's not about sex-wise.
Yeah, but you can hold it for another time then, since it's not about sex-wise?
Okay then.
Yeah, man. All right. Okay, as we continue to take your telephone calls at 974-5079, 5051, 5043, and 1-888-991-4152. It reminds me that we need to talk about the retirement age. Yes, Dr. Walcott.
No, I've gotten myself under a little country. I don't get emotional.
You do every time you come here.
I try not to. But you see,
yes.
this
call for me, caller, please.
This again ties into the whole construct of and I think the caller probably has lost the whole concept of what rape is. Rape is you.
No, the caller is saying, that he doesn't believe it, and he was throwing it in the conversation.
Whoever believes
I have to protect my caller.
Yeah, protect him. Because whoever believes these things, really, the concept of rape is you forcing your power and forcing the submission of this woman or man to your will and power. And when you have a ideology that says that you should not be wearing this, you're doing the exact same thing as the rapist. You're forcing your your own views and ideology and oppressing
and I asked
using
a question
that as a justification for the same thing.
I agree with that. And
Basically, an ideological extension of a rapist.
And I agree with you 100%, and then some. But then I asked a question about the role of Christianity in that perspective and what is being preached from the pulpit. And we don't nobody enough answer it, but I ask it. Hello, caller. Good evening. Welcome to Sex Wise. Hello.
Hello.
Hey. Good evening.
Yeah. Hi.
Yes. Hi.
I was listening to your program on Sunday.
Yes.
And I heard you say to, I think it was Robert.
Mm-hmm.
We have to take over. And what I'm saying now is that a lot of things not going to be changed until, because I as an individual, I see IRFM as the monarch, Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
And until...
But you recall the context of that, though, because Robert was asking, so how do we begin to change? And I explained to him that we do it, we start within ourselves, first of all.
Right.
And then that can be translated to our families, our bedrooms, our homes. And then from our homes to our little district, our communities. And then we'll see that change branching out. But if we don't take responsibility first of all, if we don't look at ourselves, because we have to begin to ask ourselves some questions, how am I part of this problem?
Part of the right.
So this is that's what I meant. In a wider context.
I'm seeing it in a different light.
Yes. No. You're seeing it right, but I'm just saying that you have to start somewhere, because once we do that,
with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I am seeing it wider, as though IRFM and staff and all its associates would have to take over the government of Jamaica.
Then look at hold on. But me wouldn't publicize this up on the radio.
Andrea, I just see him somebody will give it. I just see him somebody I talk to will give it papa seed.
Are you giving the papa seed?
I'm Mr. Well, I was talking to your producer last Sunday, and I'm saying that I was saying to her that I hope that IRFM is considering to take the government.
Goodness gracious. My brother, look here. This is the place to talk about
I wonder
that.
if I should leave now.
No, we have a liar. We have a liar. Okay.
I understand. A lot of these changes.
No, we have a liar. We have a liar. Okay.
I understand. A lot of these changes.
My brother, no man, certain things in the talk on the radio, man.
Yes, I understand.
Yes, sir, man.
Move over that.
All right, okay. Well, go down to them on how they.
All right, take care of yourself.
All right, 974-5079, 5051, 5043, and 1-888-991-4152. As we say good evening to DigiChris, who is standing by. He's going to be on in 6 minutes. Hello, caller. Good evening. Welcome to Sexwise.
Blessed love, Miss Andrea.
Greetings, my brother.
Well, go on, man.
Everything, Irie.
Aye. Jatabe, you know.
Yeah, man. St. Thomas. Yeah.
What may I say to Miss Andrea?
Yeah.
Me not see nothing wrong with a woman walk naked, because woman and man never.
Jatabe like a credit done.
And sometimes nothing go on for the woman, and if you just move them way, Miss Andrea. So me not see nothing wrong with that.
All right. Give thanks.
Yeah.
1 minute you have leave still in a Jatabe.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. Hold it just in case of emergency. All right. Maybe we can squeeze in one or two. I'm not quite sure. 5 minutes to go. 974-5079, 5051, 5043, and 1-888-991-4152. Facebook comment from Canada. The current system is not working. So the public offender, the sex offenders registry is needed. Hello, caller. Good evening. Welcome to Sexwise.
Hi,
Hey, good evening.
how are you?
Well, thanks. And you?
I'm all right.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, your panelist there.
Sorry, say that again?
Your panelist there.
Oh, you're saying good evening to the panelists, yeah?
Good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening.
Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I want to let it add a short until we know how much time left.
Yes.
But trust me, what the money, man? I mean, a woman can live in your bed, she has a birth about, she has a birthday suit, and she tells you no, and you force your will on her. It's still rape.
Yeah.
Now compare that to a lady who stands to the desk. That lady is, at least she have a loan. Right? That doesn't give you the right to say, boy, you might wash away. I mean, she's
Right, I understand the point you're making. Yeah, totally to the point. We're out of time, so sorry, because you call towards the end of the program, but thanks as usual for your call. And just kind of, before we just going out in kind of linking up to the point that he just made, it's a discussion we've been having all evening about, what constitutes consent.
Indeed.
and what doesn't. And he's saying, you said no and so on. But then I want to talk about, just quickly reiterate that, but then to say from Dr. Walcott again, once we look at consent, to also say what rape is about. Because you talk about the clothes and the arousal and so on. But let's just look at consent first. What constitutes consent? Mr. Gordon.
Consent is a lady of her own volition, her own will, without intimidation, without duress, without any fraudulent or trick bringing her to that stage. She decides to have sexual intercourse with a man. And that applies to a wife, for example, if there's separation between husband and wife, and the husband tricks the wife, forces her, extorts her to have sex with him, it is rape.
And we didn't even talk about statutory rape and so on. But you did, in a way, you did mention that.
Indirectly, I did, yes. Well, I can say it quickly. What we mean by statutory rape is that the person who consented to have sex is too young to consent. So even if she consented,
even if she say yes, and
even if she say yes,
you willingly,
and you go along and everything cool, it is rape because she's too young. She cannot agree.
She's under 16.
She's under 16. She cannot.
This is something that young boys must also know. I find myself saying this a lot to young boys who just leave school in particular, like leave 5th form, 6th form, and still having relations with like a third former.
That is so.
This is an interesting thing.
Yeah. And I think we can't reiterate it enough that rape is actually classified as a violent crime because it's about power, it's about oppression, it's about a pathological way of exercising your power over another person and violating their basic human rights. And one of the things I wanted to talk about briefly is how you actually are supposed to manage power. To establish yourself as a powerful individual, and if you look throughout history, the people who have been the most powerful are the ones who have empowered all those around them. And that is a true basis, the true healthy way of managing power.
I'm going to invite you back to talk about power.
Empower the people around you.
You have to come back and talk about power, because we heard the Prime Minister, for example, saying that she's not the only person said, a lot of politicians say when we are in power. Can you be in power, and what does in power mean? And if you say you're in power, what are you really saying? You know
what?
Question.
I love the concept of politicians, and people talk about leaders. I never use the word leaders.
Neither do I.
I use the word representatives. Yeah. Politician is a servant of the people.
Yeah.
That's what you are. You are employed primarily by the people of the country. And like every other servant, you have to be understanding that your boss is the people. And those that don't realize that usually get the message.
Power. Those that don't realize that are in power.
They get the message.
So you'll be back to talk about power and politics and I can't say the other P word that I was thinking. No, it's not that one. Oh goodness, I know I'm going to have to say it because people are going to say I was going to say another word. All right, pause, I was going to say. All right, I know, Mr. Gordon, that you want to quickly reiterate, because I know you feel strongly about this mob culture, this vigilante justice. Yes. And there's something you want to say about that in terms of talking to the nation. People are listening.
Look, it's a very traumatic experience to be subject to rape, I'm sure. And I believe that relatives, friends, and members of the community would be properly and rightly up in arms. They would feel upset, and they would have a sense of just quick justice and lynching the persons who are alleged to have committed the crime. But we cannot go down that road. Despite the strong feeling we have, we must let the system, the best system, though not perfect, which is the judicial system, we should let it work, because we are endangering every single person, including ourselves, when we take the law into our hand. Because others will do it when you have a motor vehicle accident against you. Others will do it against you when you have a dispute with your neighbor. And once we go down that road, we are going astride a dangerous horse that we cannot rein in.
Wow. Final words, quickly. Dr. Walcott.
I think one of the things that we have to look at is really to understand that in our responsibility to others, in our responsibility to our community, we really should focus more on how we can promote healing in persons who have been victimized, rather than in how we can extract our version of justice. And I think, just to reiterate what was said before, that we really need to rein in a lot of the emotional impulsivities that we have and channel them into areas that they are more productive and that they create healthier social environments for the persons who are actually in need of the care and support. Very little has been said, and I don't know, again, I'm not blaming any media house. Very little has been said in terms of starting up things of how we can get together to support the persons who are survivors, who are suffering, what can be done. I haven't even heard anything. Normally you hear somebody come out with donations can be given to here or there. Nothing. What we are all about is that we need to start castrating, lynching, murdering, and going into the things that label us the dark ages so many years ago. So we haven't
What
come
you have
very
done,
far.
what you have done, though, Dr. Walcott, is to really, we talk about the horse that cannot be reined in, but this one, I think you're doing some good as far as that is concerned, in refocusing our attention to what is also important in the bigger picture in all of this, and that in the terms of how the survivors have, even while we speak so loudly about their rights, that we violate them in the way, in our own response. So thank you very much for that and for refocusing our attention. I'm sure my colleagues in the media here at IRI and outside of IRI FM will begin to pay particular attention to how we deal with survivors of rape in particular. Thank you very much. That's Linton Gordon, the attorney at law in our studio this evening, and Dr. Jeffrey Walcott, consultant psychiatrist. My name is Andrea Williams. My producer is Joy Morgan, and we're making way